Hello, I'm Charles Smith, docent and educator here at LeMay, America's Car Museum, and I'll be presenting this month's topic on the If Cars Could Talk series about the cars of Prohibition. And we're going to be talking about the history of Prohibition, the 18th Amendment, which started it all, the ban of alcohol in the United States, and then the resultant failure of all our systems to enforce the law and have bootleggers and gangsters sell and transport liquor across the United States from around the borders and also inside the country. The 18th Amendment was enacted in 1919, effective in January of 1920. It outlawed the manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcohol. It did not outlaw the drinking of alcohol, and therefore the whole alcohol and liquor industry of the United States, the breweries, the vintners, and the distilleries were basically outlawed by a law that put a lot of people out of work and changed the society of America. This was at the time of just ending of World War I, where the country was bouncing back from the overseas war. There were a lot of immigration problems, and the nation had these new laws to deal with. The amendment was passed by Congress by 2/3 majority, and then also by 3/4 of the state legislatures to become the law. But the law that basically, the Volstead Act, that made the penalties for the prohibition laws, basically outlawed anything more than 0.5% alcohol to drink. So it made for an underground alcoholic system. You had people making stills at home, people making stills in the wood, people having confiscated liquor from the breweries that were in warehouses, and also the importation of foreign liquor through the border, either through New York and the rum runners on the boats from Jamaica and overseas, and especially from Canada down south, either through Detroit or from Vancouver and Victoria. The cars that were used to transport the illegal liquor were cars of the time. The Tin Lizzies, the Ford, the Model Ts, the Packards, the Cadillacs, the Buicks, the Whiskey Six, they called the Buicks and the Studebakers, that they had the big cars with a big 6-cylinder engine that could transport a lot of liquor. You had the gang starting out. Al Capone, a young 25-year-old gangster in Capone, started his own gangster industry and had the turf battles in Chicago that resulted in the St. Valentine's Massacre, where 7 people were gunned down. There were over 500 people killed in gangland slayings during Prohibition. The stills produced alcohol that was not quality alcohol. Obviously, when you have an underground and contraband type substance, there was no quality control. So people put wood alcohol and other chemicals in the liquor that caused more than 1,000 deaths every year from drinking spoiled liquor. The law enforcement was a terrible problem because most, if not really all of the agents and the police were being bribed to look the other way. It was a good job. You got paid to do your job, and then you got paid even more not to do your job, to enforce the law. So there was a famous bootlegger here in the Seattle area called Roy Olmsted. He was a sergeant on the police force. He got involved in bootlegging, was fired, paid a $500 fine, and then set up a whole bootlegging industry in the Northwest. He had the police officers on his payroll. He had shippers. He had transporters. He used boats that he bought from Boeing Aircraft Corporation that could do 45 miles an hour. He would buy liquor in Canada, say it was going to Mexico so he wouldn't have to pay the departure tax, take it to an island off the San Juans or in Harrell Strait, and then unload it, and then had a whole distribution network for shipping the liquor in the Puget Sound area. People who drank liquor were really not under penalties because they drinking and having 200 gallons of home liquor in your home, or even the doctors prescribing liquor for maladies, that was all legal. So it was a great change in the way society works. We had the Roaring Twenties. You had the speakeasies where people went to have a drink. Now women would come to the speakeasies and drink with gentlemen because they had bands playing, jazz bands, the Charleston. Before it was just men in a saloon getting drunk and having lunch and coming home and not being good citizens after that. But now we had the Great Society, or Great Roaring 20s going. Toward the end of the 20s, a dramatic change. The Great Depression took hold. The country had almost 40% unemployment rate. All the liquor money that was lost from the taxation on alcoholic beverages was lost to the economy. There was an income tax law that was passed, so that made up for some of the money. But the fact that the nation lost millions and millions of dollars of revenue, and it all went underground. So the rich people in the country now were basically criminals. It didn't take much talent to make a lot of money. All you had to do would be brave to drive a car, or work in a warehouse, or become a gang member. So Prohibition really changed society in America. And some of the old cars that were driven, we have many examples of them here in the museum. This example here of a 1936 Ford, you can see the liquor in the back. It was used in the Appalachian because even after the Prohibition law was repealed in 1933, many states were still dry. So they had their own state laws prohibiting alcohol. So the bootleggers in the Southeast became the NASCAR race drivers. You've got people like Ray Voigt, Junior Johnson, Roy Hall and Raymond Parks. All those guys started out with NASCAR, and they were bootleggers. They learned to drive fast on the curvy mountain roads, turning their taillights off to make the revenuers who were chasing them run off the curves behind them. They would have smoke screens and drag chains behind the cars to make dust storms behind the cars and do that. And even they had tanks in the cars so that when they would get stopped, they would let all the liquor out of the bottom of the car, so they really couldn't be charged with anything because they had no liquor product in the car. They couldn't prove that they were carrying liquor. Some of them did go to jail. They were brought out. And the gangsters, Al Capone had wonderful armored Cadillacs to drive around in. His lawyer had Duesenbergs. He had McFarlanes. The Dutch Schultz, the gangster, had a wonderful Lincoln. Others had Chrysler Imperials that they drove around. Even the government agents at the time started developing armored cars to chase the bootleggers around with. They would have ports in the windshield that they could shoot machine guns out of. They had steel plates in front of the tires so they could get shot out when they were being chased by the revenuers. So it was quite the situation. The political changes that occurred after Prohibition sort of died down, but again, there was still Prohibition, and it was a great experiment that went wrong. You'll get to see some of the cars today, the wonderful big touring cars that were used, some of the smaller cars that were used, and you'll get a feel for all the 19-teens and 1920s and 30s cars that could have been used as part of the Prohibition era. So thanks for your attention, and hope you have a good meeting today listening to Cars Can Talk. We're also in conjunction with KBTC, our local PBS station here in Tacoma, and they are rebroadcasting Ken Burns' three-part series of Prohibition. It's a wonderful series. It gives you the history and background of the Prohibition era. It tells a wonderful story, and hope you enjoy the program. Thank you.